Our next speaker is Albert Figurt. Some of you may remember him from his performative lecture he gave in Split. I don't know what to expect this time, but I think it's going to be as performative as the last time. So, yeah. Good luck.
Hopefully. Okay. So, my name is neither Constant Dollard nor Albert Figurt. In fact, it's a nickname. And the funny part is that it has been donated to me. I didn't choose for it. The very first day of high school, a friend came to me and say, "So your name is Alberto?" A new friend. Yeah. Why don't you try with Albert Figurt? So eventually I went for it, and then I met, without questioning, and then I met this friend again a couple of years ago, and I had to tell him that I'm constantly using this name for artistic purposes, and I also asked him about the meanings, and he wasn't able to explain me. So probably it's a found name that passed through him and came to me, and now I'm using it. Okay. So I was supposed to present yesterday in an artistic way, but anyway, my direction is speaking about some ideas around a video that I created, and it's how photography, so we come back to the basics, becomes visualized and shared, first of all in public spaces and then eventually on the net, while video content, especially that video content that is produced by users, becomes photographic or even pictographic. So in pictography, words are still images, and images combine in a discourse, and that's my way of interpreting the interpersonal and communicating taste that digital clips usually manifest. Okay, so I'm gonna introduce the topic in about 10 minutes. Then we're gonna watch the movie that is just 4 minutes and 33 seconds long. And then I will add some details and directing notes. And finally we can discuss if you want. Okay, so when I was very small, I used to imagine God as a voyeur. Actually the ultimate one. And that's not my fault. It was presented like that. It was introduced to us at the doctrine like that. Invisible, pervasive, sees everything, judges everybody. And they also provide you with some very effective symbols. So from the Kabbalah to Freemasonry and eventually to United States $1 bill, the all-seeing eye, or the Providence one, is always there, double-checking the word. Not very comfortable, I must say. And also it seems that every now and then this hyper-peeping Tom could punish you from the top with a massive earthquake or a universal flood, or more simply and specifically with a lightning, some sort of ad personam execution. But not every lightning strikes a man or a tree, fortunately, at least not in the latest 2 centuries, thanks to Benjamin. So always as a child, I started to imagine God not only as a voyeur, occasionally devoted to meteorological sniping, but also as a photographer, a flash-passionate one, of course. Maybe he likes to take photos of his subjects, apart from constantly spying on them, I must have been thinking. Or maybe he loves to collect chronological snapshots of his properties, since the very same subjects are now substantially rearranging them. Well, this is a very good story to start with. Indeed, everything I'm going to speak in this brief presentation is already here. We got religion, we got the vision, and the most important fact, we got the art of capturing visual slices of the real by means of some kind of machinery. Okay. In the latest 10 years, we experienced massive shifts in the video photographic arena. Everything is quickly turning digital, so prices go down while quality goes up. Celluloid and film leave place to magnetic tapes and eventually to portable external memories. And post-production that now means tinkering with numbers and not anymore with light-impressed physical grains. can theoretically twist, rearrange, or even distort any kind of shooting, thus becoming the most important, sometimes obsessively overrated stage of cinema, video, or photography assembly line. And these are features we're all pretty familiar with. But speaking from an artistic point of view, that I presume is midway between practice and aesthetics, the biggest revolution here is probably the small LCD screen, for the simple reason that it directly concerns the primary step of any visual art, that is, how to compose an image, or, if you prefer, how to frame reality. In the old days, photography was mostly about patience and expertise. The viewfinder being just a small portable window, a neutral keyhole to temporarily reduce the human's eye to the lens one. What you really had to do was analyze the situation to be captured, adjust the camera settings according to the conditions, considering a highly sophisticated range of options like film exposure, shutter speed, light sources, etc., etc. Press the button and verify afterwards in the darkroom if your strategy was right. A typical trial and error procedure, empiric and pitiless, somewhat alchemical. Very useful if you have plenty of time and money, a little bit discouraging in other cases. With the LCD display, the situation completely turns upside down, because first, in the instant QT preview that it offers, where what you see is usually what you get, the digital image has already been processed and is presented to you as one possible final result that you can choose to preserve, cancel, modify, or whatever, as an immaterial, completely inexpensive Polaroid. Second, the click is disappeared, both acoustically and philosophically, because now you're basically watching, sometimes recording, an endless real-time video from which you decide to extract here and there singular frames to evaluate. To better understand these first two updates, you can think about the differences, both in logistical and in cognitive terms, between composing a text with a typewriter or creating it via a word processor that actually turns the page into an open and recombinant flow of sentences. Third, the eye is not forced anymore to a binding proxemics or proximity with the viewfinder, because now you can look at your framed reality with both eyes from a distance. And this leads to a lot more freedom and or experimental attitude in terms of framing, and the possibility to use the camera as an extension of your sight or even of your own memory, shopping the reel for future double-checking. Think, for example, to the upskirt phenomenon that, by coincidence, we discussed twice today, where you're basically hunting for images out of your educated reach. Or think about how an increasing number of conference participants, much more politely, I must say, but also here today, are getting used to take snapshots of PowerPoint slides during a presentation, so they can totally focus on what is said and browse the additional information later on. Moreover, a lot of technical obstacles are now mitigated or reduced by automatic or user-friendly presets, as well as picture-making applications for dummies are powerfully contaminating other media, such as cell phones. So now this refreshed, maybe also refreshing state of the art make the photographic attitude, along with these related devices, ontologically omnipresent. After all, if starting a visual safari is so painless and easy, why not? And as a matter of fact, here we are, submerged by evanescent photos and questionable photographers, living in an environment dazzled not only by urban maxi screens, but also by preview mini screens, organizing photocam-free parties in order to keep our parents or employers away from accidentally discover on Facebook our exuberant nightlife, and in the end, wondering if nowadays photography is still an artistic gesture, or maybe, much more simply, some sort of emotional collecting that occasionally can become or be considered art. I'm quoting Italo Calvino here, and you can take a photo if you want. The line between the reality that is photographed because it seems beautiful to us and the reality that seems beautiful because it has been photographed is very narrow. The minute you start saying something, how beautiful, we must photograph it, you're already close to the view of the person who thinks that everything that is not photographed yet is lost, as if it had never existed, and that therefore, in order really to live, you must photograph as much as you can, and to photograph as much as you can, you must either live in the most photographable way possible, or else consider photographable every moment of your life. The first course leads to stupidity, the second to madness. Okay. Well, looking at photography's LCD nourished ubiquity from this bulimic perspective, the very first image that pops up in my mind is the stereotyped Japanese tourist, ecstatically running around some Western historical site while compulsively taking hundreds of photos with his point-and-shoot camera. I came from Italy, where apparently store 72% of world's archaeological heritage, apparently. So I've been encountering millions of these Japanese guys throughout the years, but now it seems that the invasion is turning transnational. I'm afraid we're living a universal Japanese moment, or more precisely, also because I don't have nothing against Japanese, we're experiencing a dreamlike, never-ending Sunday photography session, that is to say, a general touristification of the photographic gaze. Indeed, all the qualities that I mentioned before are greatly emphasized and sometimes specific of what we can call the touristic framing. Nothing is closer to a shopping-the-real approach, a purely emotional involvement, and thus a superficial or at least slavish artifact than a quick and dirty picture of the Mona Lisa or the Colosseum. And the funniest part is that paintings, sculpture, and even old architectural spaces, that means isolated relics, are already icons or highly iconified manufacts. So if you consider photography as the possibility to isolate and/or immortalize a discrete image, extracting it from the continuum of space and time, the Mona Lisa, but also the Colosseum, is already some kind of metaphorical, whole-style, tangible snapshot. And this makes the Japanese attitude pretty paradoxical, not only because tourists are unconsciously producing squared photos, but also because they perfectly know that the icon has been already photographed billions of times. Indeed, they saw the classic shot in the guide before leaving home, and they will probably buy the souvenir postcard at the exit. But still, as strangers lost in a museum-like world, first thing they want to do is optically touch, double-check the promotional shot. This is a beautiful short animation film by Jan Svankmajer. This is a clip. Then they probably want to enter the icon area or aura to feed themselves via their photocams with a portion of it, and eventually tell the story or show the images to friends. It's not very different from what happens during big concerts or gatherings, where crowds of enthusiastic fans, too far from the stage, keep on taking photos to the maxi screens. Or what happens in any remote Club Med, where an exotic but hyper-realistic scenario is arranged precisely to prevent you from getting in touch with the external reality, and you accept the game enjoying what is clearly an uncanny and goofy simulation. It's a matter of faith, I think, and you want to believe, especially because usually in these situations you are on holiday, away from a stressful ordinary life. So when we speak of vision here, I'm not sure if we are addressing the faculty of see and to take photos, or the will to witness and be part of a larger-than-life event, so to capture reality. Okay, I'm done with this boring introduction. Let's go to the synopsis. This video project is about how the increasing proliferation of digital photographic equipment among common people and the astonishing overlapping of the framing activity around famous spot crossed with the visibility given to the photographer's choice by the LCD technology can give birth to a peculiar visual panorama around the target. In a formula, proliferation of digital cameras with LCD preview screen plus the act of touristic framing equal multifaceted and redundant postcardism. Okay, so let's go to the video. Buena vista. Okay. So that was me in Paris last Christmas. I decided to visit the Cathedral of Notre Dame, of course. And the first time I went there, let's say, armless. It was holiday time, so it was packed with tourists of all nationalities, and most of them were frantically taking photos. Despite the cozy atmosphere and, above all, the big no photos symbols at the entrance. So in order to simply access the right position to just look at the main attractions of the church, I have to find my way through the silently clicking swarm, and while trying not to get caught by the ever-flashing little arsenal, I catch myself spying into other people's LCD. I don't know if spy is the right word, since the dozens of preview screens that surrounded me, like alternative votive candles, were very sparkling and appealing, especially in the warm-off light typical of churches, and their owners were doing nothing to hide them. So the next day I decided to come back with my camera, actually a big camera, and I succeeded in passing also in the no photos symbols at the entrance, to investigate the touristic fever by hysterically cubing it, so we come to 3 screens, and that's the result. I choose to focus on the northern stained glass window rose, a multi-layered and very refined Gothic artifact, sort of Old Testament visual database, captivating and hypnotic, especially if rekindled by the sunset light. I never showed the real rose on camera, but you can look at how it is prismatically redistributed, spread serialized in the LCDs all around. And I think this panorama, along with many others analyzed in this very conference or in the Cimatics Festival, is a very vivid allegory of our highly mediatized era, not necessarily invoking here postmodernism or multitasking or window-based interfaces. And also, as an hyper-icon related to Infoscape, it rings several bells. For example, you may think at one of the founding short stories of cyberpunk movement, Fragments of an Holographic Rose by William Gibson, where all the pieces of a broken laser photo contain the whole picture information. And it's a rose. Coincidence. Or you can sense an Andy Warhol-like déjà vu, considering that not every white balance in the house is calibrated with the same values. So you're looking at slightly different replicas of the original silkscreen rose. And obviously, since we are in a church, you can easily build a parallel with the Holy Communion, where the body of Christ is symbolically divided into smaller units and delivered to the believers. As we already pointed out, the click is disappeared, but there's still a fantastic moment, my favorite one, in which the LCD becomes suddenly blank, soon after the silent click, a second before the appearance of the photo. And I guess that's the emotional climax. Then the tourist, photographer, believer receives his personal sacred buffer and goes away satisfied, runs away. Of course, according to the Eucharist ceremonial, all the buffers are equal. Nevertheless, each of them has to be perceived and regarded as a precious and intimate gift. And that's what happens here, where Catholic iconophilia meets transnational technological consumerism, while in the background, a real mass is taking place in the church and simultaneously in its CCTV. We know that priests are always forward-looking. Okay, if you consider body language, we're facing some kind of spiritual activity as well. Literally throwing themselves upon the scopic altar, photographers tend to raise their arms, stay on tiptoes, open the mouth, goggle the eyes. They all want to touch the rose with their lens, but unfortunately not everybody is equally equipped. So as you probably have noticed, as the movie goes on, we as spectators come closer to the target by switching from long shots of small prosumer cameras to close-ups of professional ones that are zooming the rose at that very moment. Particularly amusing is also the interaction between shooters and jaywalkers. I mean, I was behind the lines, but there was a pandemonium going on out there. Anyway, okay, just a final thing about the music you heard. The soundtrack is based on 2 cantatas by Alessandro Scarlatti, an Italian Baroque composer bridging 17th and 18th century. The first, Bella Madre dei Fiori, literally beautiful mother of flowers, is a profane cantata and celebrates Venus and love. The second, Magnificat, is a sacred one, frequently sung liturgically during Christian services, and contains an excerpt from the Gospel of Luke, where the Virgin Mary praises God. So Venus and Virgin Mary. Although these two cantatas are based on two very diverse, maybe opposite concepts of ecstasy and emotional transport, and specifically composed by Scarlatti to be performed in different spaces and occasions, I intentionally decided to mix them here, since they both can describe the fascination for the centripetal magnetic element that we have been discussing here, that is the big, colorful wind of rose. Indeed, what is defined as a rose can be read on one side as a symbol of nature and fertility, even an allusion to the vagina, the upskirt again, and on the other side as some sort of divine pupil, the all-seeing eye of my starting point. We can also feel free to perceive it as a mesmerizing Western mandala or an esoteric map to be interpreted, or coming to our more technological days as a maxi screen, or even as a mega LCD, the father of all those swarming ones down there. Indeed, both a cathedral stained glass window and an LCD screen work only if properly backlit. And here we definitely come full circle. I leave you with this polysemous, multilingual and symmetrical rhyme formula. Magnificat anima mea dominum, that we hear, was the refrain of the second cantata, and in Latin it means, my soul glorifies the Lord, versus my magnifying tool dominates. Take your conclusion, and thank you.
Any questions for Albert?
Hi, it's a great talk.
Hi.
I have something that is more a comment rather than a question. I was slightly provoked by your notion of free eyes, like some sort of increased freedom by this spatial distance between the eye of the photographer and the tool he uses. In a way, I have the impression that this digital technology, digital appliances, in a paradoxical term, work in a more limiting way, because cognitive work on a photography stops immediately, whilst using analog technical devices, you have this work continues until you see the negative or even positive image.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily, let's say, pessimist, but I see this as a particular moment in the visual history, and everything is so quickly changing that, of course, each one of us, according to his own experiences and background, can perceive it differently. So maybe my only concern is about what can happen to people that are completely born into digital, that is, into touch screens or easy-to-use interfaces and stuff like that. It's more to me a problem of, let's say, understanding, to be aware of what is going on and how things are changing, because the changes that we are experiencing nowadays are so fast, and it takes such a small time to establish a new medium or a new way of communication, that probably we can lost account of these innovations. So yeah, to me, I can agree that the problem is also to be aware. So to study the media, not only because you're passionate about communicating, but also as a manual and as a defense kit in order to take your position into the mediascape as a consumer, first of all, and eventually as a producer. I don't know if... Yeah.
Someone else?
Thank you for the very interesting talk and the images. And I found a lot of points which were very...
They are open source.
very, very rich and thought-provoking. I'll bring one up. I had the impression, looking at, especially at the short film, that I noticed you slow down the images a little bit.
Yeah, at the beginning.
But everything goes very fast in real time. And really the question I was asking myself while I was watching was like, that there's really a big difference between what's the energy? Why all this taking pictures very fast? And it made me think of a very classical situation, the phenomenon of the appreciation of art. I mean, there's obviously something there in the church which is overflowing the capacity of being taken in. Yeah. And I was fascinated by the use of the camera is like an exorcist tool to stop, to cut short that experience, which would require a lot of time, would require many things, I don't know what exactly. Mm-hmm. But for me, the way I saw it, and I would be interested in seeing if you experienced it also when you were there, it would be something like the tool is a way to relate to that experience in a way that maybe is not fully adequate. And it's paradoxical because the tool takes an image, but how many people actually watch the image they've taken?
Yeah, that's also a point.
And how much wonder does that digital image generate afterwards? So it's more like, okay, let's stop this experience, let's block it, and let's go on with something else. So I don't know.
Yeah, I can tell you a small story. I was in Notre Dame when I was very small. Always come back to childhood, I don't know why, with my parents. So I had a memory of this rose. I remember that I perceived to be overwhelmed by all the information because, I don't know, maybe the cathedral as a paradigm or as a metaphor here is very appropriate because it's a form of encyclopedia, a visual encyclopedia for people who were not able to read in the past. So if you go there and you have some visual training, you risk to be really overwhelmed just by some details. Think about the gargoyles or about the statues. So for example, the rose is full of symbols and they are also difficult to grasp. So maybe we can accept the photographic bulimia in terms of capturing and zooming, for example, but the same can be done also with the history of art manual. So it depends. The cathedral is really powerful as a container because it really can be read in different ways, and it contains a lot of layers. It's called Gothic, but I think it also contains a Baroque imaginary. I mean, Baroque in terms of the quantity of information that is pressed inside one shape. And so, yeah, I think that people taking photos, rarely will actually reopen the file once at home, especially because I take hundreds of photos. So maybe the rose was also interesting as a symbol because it's unreachable, it's high. Otherwise, if it has been down, just like a painting or the Tour Eiffel, people will go like, ooh. And so this photo can be projected with friends, but you cannot go like this with the rose. So the rose is really about you. If you want to come back to the photo, and if you're interested in zooming in and discover the mysteries of the cathedrals and the alchemy, it's up to you. But it's another difference because you want to touch the image, but you cannot be part of it. At least nobody was posing with the rose in the background. They were just capturing the rose. So I hope that at least 30% of them get eventually fascinated, maybe while downloading the photo to the hard drive.
I had a comment. I was thinking like in relationship to other religions or other civilizations. It is interesting that maybe some of those visitors are actually not Christian. Yeah. And they are taking the image and they see it indeed like mandala maybe or something else.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more that like I could see the presentation, which I liked a lot, as a part of maybe broader research in relationship between the spirituality and the technology and the image. And I think it can also be connected to the fact that there is this overdose by consuming imagery. There is effect. I don't know how it is exactly called, but there is this something effect.
Yeah.
And it happens to people who are not used to watch images and they're not have enough capacity, and then they suddenly go into the museum and then they get this illness basically. So they get sick basically.
And basically we're basically living in cathedrals now. Also here we have a lot of images in our I don't know, folders or booklets.
Yes.
It's full of images. It's, a medieval man used to live in a world with few images, and maybe the cathedral was the hype and the maximum. And so I can imagine that it was even more shocking to him. To us, the cathedral is just like a zapping phenomenon concerning religion, and so the overwhelming is there, and the overdose and the abuse of information is always a risk, and that's why I think it's important to choose and to zoom in a philosophical term, maybe philosophical way.
Yeah. And also I have a comment about the speed. I think actually you slowed it down, but maybe the reason why they are making these photos very fast actually. It can be like a snapping or zapping, but maybe also they are aware of the fact they shouldn't do it. So there is also this voyeuristic element that they are just stealing something, you know.
They're stealing something.
They're stealing, yeah. So they do it kind of fast, actually.
Yeah, but in this specific situation, as I told you, I don't know, maybe it was Christmas. I was there with a Sony PD 150 camera, and nobody told me anything. So maybe that day in particular, during the Christmas time, they made some exception. I don't know. They were stealing in a way. For example, they were stealing the moment, because there were several people, so you have to wait for your moment, take your photos, and go away. Otherwise, the other kid start pushing. So maybe they had to be very fast.
I was also taking images there, and I did it with the big camera, and I did it out of my hand, so it wasn't a problem. But there was a German crew who had a tripod, and they were expelled in seconds.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just like this, that you can do it out of your hand, but not with a tripod, which is also interesting to be part of your presentation, because if you put it on a tripod, it means you kind of ground it. It's kind of grounded. So if it's not grounded, it's okay. But once it's related to Earth, it's grounded, then you shouldn't do it actually.
Yeah.
So it's like, if is it like free of gravity, it's fine, but once you kind of then it's not.
Yes, and also the sounds are really low, because there are no big flashes anymore, no clicking of the shutter. So maybe this is another point, because otherwise, let's imagine all these people taking photos with a shutter, just like a machine gun. Instead, now this is part probably of why they decide in terms of security to say okay. And also because I can have my camera in another medium, so it would take too long to check every suitcase with I don't know, cell phones. So maybe they decide to accept the invasion and I don't know and see what will happen. Okay.
Thank you, Albert, for your challenging presentation.